Muy buenas tardes, sean todas y todos bienvenidos al
Good
Seminario
afternoon. May you
Internacional
all be very welcome
de
to the international seminar managing the El Niño phenomena and its implications on markets and supply in Latin America and the Caribbean. We thank you for your participation as from the Catholic University, and we also welcome those that are connected online via the FAO platform. As we have seen in our country and in the region, the El Niño phenomenon can have an impact upon the availability of water, agricultural production, supply chains, supply availability, and the price of food, having a direct impact upon people's lives. Thus, this discussion promoted by the FAO and the Faculty of Agronomy and Natural Systems of the Catholic University of Chile seeks to analyze these impacts and share measures that strengthen adaptation and resilience of agri-food systems and rural communities in Latin America and the Caribbean. I am the director of outreach of the Catholic University of Chile, and I will act as moderator. I would like to greet the authorities that accompany us today. First of all, Vice Rector of International Affairs of the Catholic University of Chile, Mr. René Orellana, Regional Representative of the FAO for Latin America and the Caribbean, Mr. Máximo Torero, Chief Economist of the FAO, our panelists from Panama, from Brazil, and from Chile. And the latter is director of the Faculty of Agronomy and Natural Systems. Likewise, we would like to greet all the academics from other universities that also accompany us, the authorities and officials of public services, especially from the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Transport, and to convey a greetings from the Under Secretary of Agriculture, who unfortunately is out of the city. We would like to greet producers, representatives of street fairs, and family farmers. May you all be very welcome here. And to begin with this seminar, I would like to offer the floor to Maria Montt to share some welcoming remarks with us. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to especially welcome FAO representatives and of other organizations. It's an honor for us to welcome you here at the very heart of our university. On behalf of the Catholic University of Chile, I would like to warmly welcome you and especially thank the FAO for inviting us to form part of this event. Via our faculty, we will share viewpoints and on the impacts of the El Niño phenomenon, and we will reflect on the challenges that entails for food security and the protection of communities in Latin America and the Caribbean. Likewise, I would also like to formally greet the authorities, our guests, and especially Máximo Torero, our specialist academics and representatives of international entities, producer organizations, farmers, and students that accompany us in this room and also online. The purpose of this seminar reflects one of the most important goals of our university in view of its strategic development in the next few years, and that is to share knowledge with society and to contribute as from discovery, the transfer of knowledge, and the training of people and services so that we're able to face up to the most relevant challenges. Indeed, when we talk about climate change, food security, and sustainable management of natural resources with territorial resilience, we're talking about events that go beyond borders and that require collaborative responses between countries, communities, and all sectors within this framework. As from the Vice Rector's area, we have taken on board the task of generating these networks and of establishing international strategic alliances, promoting student and academic mobilization, strengthening scientific research, and we hope that these events will help to connect our university with the major global challenges. Thus, we maintain active relationships with several international networks with different countries and universities, and most of them are, of course, in Latin America. We understand internationalization not as an end in itself, but as a tool to enrich our capacity to understand and transform reality. In this room, we are indeed thinking about that. The idea is to be a university at the service of global and local challenges, and that involves connecting knowledge with reality and to translate research and innovation into concrete solutions and to establish collaboration with the state, with civil society, and with communities. Food security, climatic adaptation, and risk management are all challenges that indeed require that coordination between different stakeholders, and you are all represented in this room. This morning, I understand that an important meeting was also held this morning with the FAO, with Indonesia, and therefore going beyond Latin America and the Caribbean. I would like to highlight the leadership of the Faculty of the Economies and Natural Systems and our university that organizes this event. The faculty since 1904 has a close relationship with the agricultural and forestry sector and has promoted reciprocal relations with public entities, with private entities, and with the community. This long-standing work has contributed to the strengthening of our systems so that we can have an adequate work. And this commitment acquires an even greater relevance faced with the challenges implicit in climate change, and which also require greater cooperation for development, the prevention of conflicts, and the construction of confidence. In this sense, Francisco I and Leon XIV, the two latest popes, have reminded us that aspects such as food and water are a fundamental ethical commitment and a fundamental condition for the human condition. Faced with phenomena such as El Niño, which indeed threatens essential goods, the response cannot be indifference. Cooperation, solidarity, and joint work between institutions, communities, and countries is fundamental. And in this sense, universities have a key role to play. We need to provide evidence and knowledge and train people that will lead the transformations required by our societies. In this sense, we are honored to have the participation of Máximo Torero, who is the chief economist and general subdirector general of the FAO, internationally known for his contributions to the study of food security, poverty, and sustainable development, and he has held leading positions at the International Food Policy Research Institute, which is one of the most prestigious institutes in terms of food security. He holds a PhD in economics obtained from UCLA, and with numerous high-impact publications. He has devoted his work to generate evidence, promote policies, enabling the strengthening of agri-food systems to reduce inequalities and improve the well-being of the most vulnerable populations. It is a privilege to welcome today one of the most influential voices in the international debate, when it comes to the development and resilience faced with climate change. We thank all of you for being here, and we hope that this meeting will help to strengthen the necessary dialogue and generate new collaboration opportunities. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias por estas palabras de bienvenida. Iniciamos ahora el bloque de palabras.
Thank you for these opening remarks. Now we'll start discussing the importance of this dialogue for Chile and Latin America. Mr. René Orellana, Assistant Director General of FAO for Latin America and the Caribbean, you're recognized. This is Maria Montt, Mrs. Sonia Reyes, Director of Dissemination of School of Agronomics and Natural Resources, Máximo Torero, authorities. It's a pleasure sharing with you this growingly or increasingly important topic, resilience of food markets vis-a-vis El Niño and other extreme climatic events, which poses ever-growing challenges for food security and territorial development. In the last few years, we have seen how climate variability has intensified impacts affecting not only agricultural production, but also local economies, supply, prices of food, and day-to-day life of millions of people. El Niño reminds us that climate vulnerability is the #1 challenge for sustainable development. Thus, resilience means beyond reacting to an emergency, means anticipating scenarios, strengthening positions, reducing vulnerabilities, and investing in capabilities to protect livelihoods and support the access to adequate food before, during, and after crisis. This is even more important if we consider that Latin America and the Caribbean are still facing food security challenges. The recent report on the status of food security around globally shows that the region is improving, but still millions of people are facing difficulties to access adequate food. Plus, the high cost of a healthy diet, limiting the access to nutritional food, especially in contexts which are affected by climate and social and political and economic effects. We have an influence on the circulation of food and the ability of territories to have proper levels of food supply. FAO, we acknowledge the contribution to access to nutritious food, and we're including short circuits, farmers markets, monitoring systems for prices, upgrading of traditional and wholesale markets, and supply mechanism for public procurement. These initiatives help in the transparency in reducing food waste and strengthening the links between producers and consumers, and to enhance resilience. We hope this dialogue will strengthen capabilities and will enhance public policies and will promote articulated answers to the challenges of climate variability. Resilience requires evidence, coordination, cooperation among stakeholders, territorial view to disseminate knowledge. I'd like to thank Pontificia Universidad Católica for receiving the experts that will share their knowledge and all of you in the session. Let's have a fruitful day. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Orellana.
Thank you, Mr. Orellana. Now, to better understand the scope and we will be listening to Mr. Torero, is the chief economist of FAO. Thank you. It's a pleasure being with you. Unfortunately, the microphone is off. The microphone is off. We cannot hear Mr. Torero. With the risks and uncertainty, let me start by a concept which is important to understand the situation. This is something we put together in the last few years with the multiple problems we faced. COVID-19, war in Ukraine, the Panama Canal, and the Strait of Hormuz. The concept principle is that these agri-food system we have is under the risk of uncertainty. Risks may be predicted, but uncertainty is something we don't know. The likelihood, it's difficult to predict. And then I will be explaining why I believe we need to understand these logic. So what are those risks and uncertainty? Three main blocks: agriculture, agri-food systems, though energy, and humanitarian aspects affecting their response to emergency. The food system, because we have seen the importance of inputs, agricultural inputs, all of them are being affected. We've removed 20-30% of the inputs around the world. And this is something we cannot change because that means an investment of 5 to 10 years. Unlike the war with Ukraine, where the shock was sunflower and wheat, and there was a supply reaction. So inputs are critical and are quite vulnerable because they require strong investment. Second, trade. It's clear for everyone what's happening in global trade. We are a system, but tariffs may change from one day to the next. We used to take 6 months or a year to discuss tariffs. Now, tariffs may change in 24 hours. So such an uncertainty in trade, because that's uncertainty, it's something we need to take into account because it affects our exports' competitive advantages and our value chains. Value chains that were efficient, were timely for export. Now those chains is just in time instead of just in case instead of just in time, and that means decision making. And we're not talking about a global spaghetti bowl for foreign trade. And something that was a lesson in COVID-19, logistics, it's critical. Because of the drought in the Panama Canal, we had a lower movement of vessels. But there is a congestion, but the infrastructure goes beyond. COVID-19 was not only the maritime portion, logistics, in domestic logistics, and big exporters, in the case of Brazil, could not move commodities at the pace they needed because of the drought in big exporting countries. So those elements are affecting production. Inputs are affecting productivity. Trade will affect my planting strategy, and the logistics, of course. It's part of my cost equation. And any change in world production If you control certain trade and certain commodities, that will be affecting prices and will lead to other problems. What else we know? Because of climate change, what will happen with climate? We have exceeded 7 out of the 9 global limits. There will be a proliferation of diseases, plagues, of products and animals that because of temperature change, something we're not prepared to. This is a very challenging world. To make it even more difficult, macroeconomics, energy. Again, we have seen the problem of energy with the war in Ukraine, now in the Strait of Hormuz, the link through biofuels, but the importance of energy for production, for logistics, packaging. For us, it was a surprise learning that 60% of the water pumping for irrigation uses fuel. I would have thought that diversification of energy was being transferred to the agri-food system, but it is not the case. And then debt, growth, and exchange rate affecting net importers and ground or landmines and nuclear pollution that would prevent land from being used for food production. And then the humanitarian aspect, the migration, refugees, and food production horizontally now. We have the water stress, which cuts across everything. And of course, climate change, the certainty we have, the frequency and intensity of climate events will grow. That's a certainty. So that's a risk, and we need to model that risk to continue to operate in that arena. Now, El Nino. El Nino is taking place in a complex context where inputs are expensive, commodity prices as a wheat, corn, soy are low, and margins are narrow. Unlike when in Ukraine, when margins were greater with the input prices and did not affect producers as it is the case now. Within what we're having less inputs, people are happy because urea price was down. Uh, and China because it was being more efficient and effective in selling urea. So it's a lower demand means my soil are not prepared for additional stress. And that's what El Nino will bring. And we need to be ready for that. So we want to know whether markets can take more, Then we have a publication called SOCO 2020, which tries to do resilience of agri-food trade given the system-wide shocks such as El Nino. Now, we know that El Nino will affect prices, corn prices, wheat prices, among other products. But we also need to understand that that impact will not be consistent. Your case of Peru, northern Chile, you will have floods, and in the southern part, you will have less water and other variations. No climate agency can say with certainty what's the net effect. And the third question is what policies are protecting and what policies may amplify the problems. SOCO reviews strategic stocks, social protection, trade, and how these may help the situation. But here, what matters is the concept of resilience. This is resilience of emergencies. This is resilience of risks and uncertainty that we can face. And what to do given these shocks, how to deal with them. There are several concepts and 5 capabilities: preventing, anticipating, absorbing, adapting, and transforming. But let me focus on 2, which are key, I believe. Preventing. And the second is absorbing. Preventing because I can get ready in advance. I can do anticipatory actions that will help us minimizing the impact of risk and absorbing, because I know the shock will take place. No matter how the Niño will be, there will be a Niño. Regardless of the Hormuz Strait shock, there will be an effect. So I need the ability to absorb that. During COVID-19, our countries, except for one, we could have absorbed the shock of COVID-19 through social protection programs in place. And that led to the GDP were not as big as what it would be otherwise. Even in Brazil, they managed to drop hard poverty during COVID-19 because they strongly increased direct transfers. But when talking about preventing and absorbing, especially preventing, we need an information system allowing us to forecast things and forecast on risks. So how can we forecast risks? And I will give you a couple of ideas what we do to predict, to forecast. All the insurances we have are ex post. You take a snapshot, but in agriculture, it's an insurance that can be used in advance. Sometimes crops require 2 to 3 years to recover. Thus, we need these other type of insurance. So let me work on these two main dimensions in order to see how we can work in the case of El Nino and what we know about it. First, we know that given the shocks we have had in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, nobody, well, there has nobody, I mean, there has been no food crisis in the world, but the agri-food system has been able to react. And that buffering capability, it's strongly related to the trade capabilities. The value of trade has grown fivefold since 2000, became 2 billion in 2024. 8% of the traded calories were under export restrictions during COVID-19, and that was the price spike early on. But then when we had this campaign of no health without the food, we built the standards and that situation improved. 16%, half in the crisis of 2008, 2008. Markets were open and supplied, and prices, fluctuations were prices, and physical availability was not interrupted. So we can resist this in terms of absorption capability. Now, El Nino is not something new. These are two charts. Top chart is the Oceanic Niño Index, historic. That's the history between 1950 and 2021. And as you can see, there are changes between uh, too much water or too little water. And this is what we need to analyze. And then there is a moderate forecast of what could be the effect of the new El Nino. And in the bottom panel, that's the path of these O and I and how these may evolve depending on the scenario we work on. We have a strong scenario, so red, a Godzilla, which is the violet, where ocean temperatures may increase by 2.5 degrees, and the moderate, which is 1 degree in temperature increase. So that's the range of the forecast we're making. That's why no climate organization globally, not even or NOAA can say this. Now, the way we analyze El Nino is bidimensionally. Globally, our concern there are exporting countries, cereal exporters, depending on the cereal, between 5 and 4 countries. The concentration is quite high. Concentration measured by exports, and then large importers, which are 5 or 4, because an importer is affected that will have an effect on price. So what we monitor there is what is happening in these 5 countries. Today, we know that there is a delay in India, which will be affecting the rice produced in the world, in Asia, but that will affect the whole world. We know there is a severe problem with wheat, hard wheat for pasta. There was a production decrease in 15%, and that's has been as we have seen an effect in the U.S. So those 2 commodities, besides inputs through Hormuz, will have problems, but also there could be an impact on maize or corn, on wheat, and then the problems of high value products, which is your case. So what's relevant is the blooming and how these may be affected by that. So what are the big industries are doing? They're advancing the harvest, production shifting, stronger seeds to operate within this context. This is just the historical evolution, bars in yellow, previous El Nino, and the price index of FAO. That's the blue line. As you can see, the impact takes time. You have El Nino, there's effect on next production, and that will have an impact on the price index. So there is no one-to-one, but there's a delay. And what happens is that will affect the result, where there will be higher commodity prices, and that will have an effect on what we produce. El Nino 2026-27 it will become one of the most intense events. 81% of the very strong event, 3.4 and 2 degrees of heating in the water, not only affecting agriculture, will affect fishing, will also affect livestock because of forage. 97% likelihood of persistence of El Nino early next northern spring in 2027. FAO now it's insisting that because of input, we can have some pressure on availability of food by late 2026, plus the problem of El Nino that made potential high prices in late 2026 and early 2027. We're late for an insurance already because the premiums will be too high. Likelihood is high, but we can put together 3-year policies where we lose the 3rd year, but that will drop the premium price. So we have to discuss these systems now. 13 out of 24 models of the IRI CPC sets projecting El Nino 3.4 to 2 degrees in the peak trimester. So that's the evolution of what will happen and what we expect will happen. So in this context, we have to see that this is a supply shock because the excess of temperature, the excess of water will lead to an effect on production. And the net global effect is unknown. There might be cases that with more water, you will be producing more. Cases with less water, you will be producing less. But clearly, these will have an effect on the food prices. There are some simulations made, but will also be affecting the macroeconomics. In Sophie last year, we discussed that so-called food inflation. When talked about commodity price, I mean, wheat, corn, soybean, food is different. That's bread. 5% of the makeup of bread is wheat. The rest is well, labor or energy. One is the commodity price, and the different thing is food price. But clearly, if there is a lower supply in commodities, this will have a 6-month delay impact on prices. That's why we don't feel so affected by what is happening, besides gasoline and all those fuels. But in grocery stores, we don't see the price increase. This will be seen by late this year because we know the production structure has started to increase the cost. Therefore, food prices will be felt. In many OECD countries are implementing subsidies, but clearly we will have an impact that will have an effect and that will have an effect on what we produce. Some simulation says there will be a 1.9% drop in the world production of cereals in 2026 versus the record in 2025, which was a great harvest. Despite the shocks, apparently there will be a reduction between 20 to 25% of world fertilizers trade because of the closing of Strait of Hormuz. And that may affect the commodity price index, but we haven't seen such a strong, in fact, despite hard wheat and rice. And some forecast says that there might be an effect on the wheat or corn prices. Now, history shows that the meteorological shock will increase the corn world price, and this situation will persist for 6 to 7 months. That is, it will take some time. In Bogota, the wholesale price of yellow corn reacts to the propagation of 10 months. The pass-through size depends on two variables. How dependent they are on imports. In the case of Colombia, is an 80% of corn, and what they can sell. And this is something that we can work every. The case of Chile, it's a net corn and wheat importer with open markets, and pass through could be quick because of your commercial infrastructure. Now, variability goes both ways. Trade can help, but can also transfer. But what we'll find in South Africa in corn is that the drought of El Niño in 2015, 2016 drop exports and forced imports. But the rains in 2021, 2022 led to record high crops and harvest. In the case of Honduras, part of the dry corridor in 2014, 2016, the zero tariff to extra regional imports supported the situation, but clearly later on, access to trade allowed them to access those products which were not being produced domestically. Now, the biggest risk is not climate, but is responding to how markets may be impacted, and that's the closing of foreign trade. So, what we're simulating here is an initial shock of 4.9% of a commodity price increase. What happens with restrictions to export? That 4.9 goes to 9.9. And if there is a non-cooperative response, other countries are responding to that closing or restriction, this may lead to 16.1%. That's exactly what happened in 2011, especially with rice, when there was this non-cooperative competition that the rice price was skyrocketed. So we have to be careful. This may strongly increase the number of people in hunger. To give you an idea, the forecast by 2030 of the Hormuz effect is 20 million people in hunger by 2030, only by Hormuz. We have to see in this case, this is a simulation by commercial restrictions that may lead to 21.4 million people in hunger. Now, the tools which have been analyzed are emergency stocks, are scalable social protection, to be able to focus on the people that will be affected and not any average, either by hunger or poverty. We have to be very specific in focusing programs and, of course, regional reserves. This has been very successful in Asia because it has helped the coordination system. That the trigger used to be climate. Now it's more political. We've lost the technical part behind that. But there's also the anticipatory actions, which is something we are looking for. What we want to avoid now is to reverse of what we have found as an improvement in the last 3 years, the reduction in prevalence of hunger. And today, in the last SOFI for 2025, we have 644.6 million people in hunger. That's a 3-year improvement on the road.
In Latin America and the Caribbean, we're talking of 32.1 million that can reach this goal in 2030. However, we face a different problem, which is a healthy diet that will impact El Niño, because it will impact primarily on fruit and vegetables. And in this case, we're saying that healthy diets in Latin America are the most expensive ones in the world, and that could be impacted, and we indeed wish to prevent that. So what we know is that the peak of hunger will be 6 to 12 months after the climatic peak, and we want to prepare for that in advance. And why is it so important? Because the reduction of the profitability of early action is 7-1. If I begin to clean up my water basins and prepare roads, historically I know which roads are impacted, and I try to store seeds to prepare for lack of water or high temperature. Of course, I'll anticipate that problem. And if I do that exposed, the return is very significant. If I react late, as often occurs in my country, the cost is very high. The average cost of El Nino has been of around 10 to 12 million dollars. In the case of Peru, it totaled $20 million, and the objective is to reduce that. There will be a cost, of course, but it will be very difficult, and the cost will be 2 or 3 years, because I have destroyed all my plants and my fruit trees and so on. That is indeed what we want to prevent and reduce that cost, and we must find that and try to do that as soon as possible. So what we're doing is to work with information, to use the data that we have and Earth observation that will enable us to transform our knowledge and to conduct this prevention work and to better target our interventions. Two very quick ideas of what we're working on. First of all, the first pillar is statistics and preparation faced with risks, with the concept of prevention and probabilities. And the second one is how we can use this for financing and how this can help us to finance small producers, which is one of the biggest problems that we face today. So this information system implies that if we don't have information, well, you won't know what to do. This gives us certain ideas and enables us to better focus our actions. We normally assume that that information exists, and therefore, how can we work with these models? We have to work on this. And we believe that often that happens by default. People feel that information simply appears, but no, it requires information. It requires investments. So what is it that we have been working on? Well, we have modeled climatic volatility. We're also making headway with conflicts. We're also modeling the lag problem. And we are also working on with averages that were not very accurate. And here, spatial information helps us enormously, together with AI and with field validation, to make headway with these aspects very quickly. Today, for example, we can map our crops, where we grow, which seeds need to be replicated, and so on. We can also model the yield of crops with a very high resolution. We can have a clearer view of my crop, the situation of my crop as a result of more or less water, and to prepare for that adequately. But I can also obtain that spatial information and better model the credit risks for producers, because the financial system is not ready for these risk levels and these levels of uncertainty in the agricultural world. And therefore, we focus on the mapping of arable land, which enables me to use the dynamics of vegetation for this purpose. And this can mean that we can significantly improve the mapping of our crops and how they are evolving. And we use this for the information system that the FAO has promoted. And that enables us to have an idea of how these main exporters will be impacted and to take action on that, but we can also model yield. And this is something when I started working at the FAO 8 years ago, I was very surprised that the biggest organization in terms of food didn't have this information at hand. Today, however, we have more information on yield and we have a higher level of accuracy, enabling us to understand what may happen and to prevent those limitations that we faced in the past. We can even model this and improve our traditional seed models, for example. We have a much better technology enabling us to conduct a better modeling of what is actually happening. But as I said, we can even take a step beyond that, and we can include other information components because the credit risk scoring is based on variables obtained from surveys. And so people, they require, for example, ownership deeds and so on. But with high resolution spatial information, we are able to know about the evolution of crops, and we can improve the accuracy in order to estimate when a producer will be in default or not. And that is indeed what we want to achieve. And we have clearly found that satellite variables are in second and third place when it comes to explanations. It is no longer age that was used traditionally. And we also have a non-parametric information that improves that much more. But notice the value of this information and how this can help us to unblock a credit. And normally the agricultural system did not allow me to do that. We will be sharing the presentation later on. And we want to prevent this problem to unblock a credit, for example. That would be a major contribution. And finally, something that you may have at hand. The FAO has designed the FAO Risk Monitor. It is, you can download it from that web page that you can see there, and we model several climatic risks in accordance with probabilities, and also including animal and vegetable diseases. For example, we have a lot of experience with locusts. And the FAO is the only entity that have obtained information for several years now. And when we faced the latest locust crisis, we were therefore ready for that. But now we've automated this. We already have the models in place. Why we can conduct a 3-month predictions, quarterly predictions. And we are working with reinsurers for that purpose. We have technical entities that analyze animal and vegetable pests. So, and first of all, we approach countries with that information. We have worked with a Norwegian entity, and we are modeling subnational conflicts, not wars. Today, we can predict those sub-regional conflicts. Now, what we do with the risk monitor, well, the ones at the bottom, well, what you can see at the bottom are all the hazards that we cover. Excess temperature, rainfall, floods, teleconnections, tropical cyclones, earthquakes, volcanoes, animal health, locusts, and conflicts. But we also have a look at what we call the profile, real-time monitoring, and also predictions. And why do I want to predict? Well, because we're working with different reinsurers in order to develop policies based on probabilities, and that is something very positive. We already have a whole set of policies and we need to implement them. And this is the risk monitor. You can gain access to this at the webpage that I mentioned, and you can see how we can find the different underlying elements. And of course, it can include the different information layers that you may have. But the main objective of this risk monitor, after that, we map the risks to price volatility, excessive price volatility. And why do we say excessive price volatility? Because volatility protects liquidity, but if it's excessive, that is something negative, and therefore we're modeling this for cereals. We have that capability because of the amount of data, and after that we look at this at a country level. Not for wheat, but for bread. And we do that at a country level. And therefore, this helps us to face up to these risks as resulting from an excessive price volatility. And finally, we have also begun to forecast acute food insecurity, which is what we need for emergencies. But short term, in the short term, and this is very important because it enables us to predict what we're doing, and we're doing this for 15 countries, a transition from 0 to 1. In other words, from not having acute food insecurity to having acute food insecurity, or to remain in acute food insecurity. That enables us to make plans in advance, because so clearly this will help me to achieve this return. So we have made a lot of progress. These are the policies that we have based on probabilities. So this is the first time in history that a reinsurance company develops policies based on probabilities, and that is a major change, and we hope that other reinsurers will follow suit. What is most important, I believe, is to act before and not after, but to act in advance, we require tools. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Torero, for this very interesting presentation and for helping us to connect climate change with production, markets, and access to food. Now we'll have a look at a brief FAO institutional video on the supply of food in Latin America and
En América Latina y el Caribe, fenómenos climáticos como el Niño ponen en riesgo la estabilidad y seguridad de los sistemas alimentarios y exigen estrategias de adaptación, inversión en resiliencia y políticas públicas que protejan a las comunidades y ciudades. En la región, las ciudades se alimentan gracias al trabajo de miles de familias productoras, de comerciantes y trabajadores que conectan el campo con la mesa. Ese vínculo es el corazón de los sistemas alimentarios, sostenido tanto por los mercados tradicionales como por los sistemas públicos de abastecimiento y comercialización de alimentos. Ferias libres y mercados mayoristas y minoristas son donde el 74% de los hogares de menores ingresos compra sus productos frescos. Los sistemas públicos, por su parte, aseguran el acceso a alimentos de calidad, precios justos y estabilidad del mercado en momentos de crisis, manteniendo reservas estratégicas y facilitando una distribución eficiente. La Organización de las Naciones Unidas para la Alimentación y la Agricultura, FAO, articula este trabajo como Secretaría Técnica de la Red de Sistemas Públicos de Abastecimiento, que reúne a 19 países y ha impulsado tanto la inclusión económica de la agricultura familiar como la modernización de los mercados tradicionales. Estos sistemas ofrecen productos hasta un 30 a 50% más económicos que los supermercados. En Chile, el 58% de las ferias libres ofrece alimentos más saludables y frescos, con precios hasta 40% más bajos. En Brasil, el programa ProHort de CONAP monitorea diariamente precios y volúmenes en 62 mercados mayoristas, permitiendo responder a tiempo ante alzas de precios. Estas experiencias muestran que América Latina y el Caribe cuenta con el conocimiento y las instituciones necesarias, porque frente al Niño y los efectos del clima, los sistemas públicos y los mercados de la región no solo actúan, resisten, se adaptan, innovan y siguen garantizando el acceso a alimentos para millones de personas sin dejar a nadie atrás.
Bien, para profundizar precisamente en este tema.
So to delve on this topic, Mr. Joadintini is a FAO officer for food systems in Latin America and the Caribbean. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleased to be here, not only because we are in the center of knowledge, but how the players who are part of the food systems in this country, as well as those in the social media. The idea is to discuss traditional markets and public systems for supply and marketing of food in Latin America and the Caribbean as a mechanism for mitigation and response to El Nino. I'll try to be within my time allotment. This is the effect of El Nino in the region. This is a history. The yellow are drought or less rainfall, and blue, it's a higher rainfall, which is the case in Chile. And we have seen clear evidences of drought in Central America and the Amazon and Brazil. El Nino is one of the most dangerous and recurring climate anomalies in the planet. It has a strong impact on global food systems, as Mr. Torero just said, may reduce agricultural production in key regions, affecting food security, especially in developing countries. These make even more severe a challenging situation where the increase of fertilizers price and fuels prices is affecting transportation, thus affecting the purchasing power of households and affecting the response to keep the livelihood, thereby pushing more people to food insecurity. Climate change and phenomena such as El Nino are changing agriculture in an environment of uncertainty, endangering the stability of food systems and food security. Vulnerability of the food systems to these events, which require resilience in public policies, considering communities and cities. El Nino is not just a climate phenomena, it's a system-wide threat affecting sustainability of food production, demanding a coordinated response to mitigate the impact and guarantee access to enough and healthy food for all. This was published by FAO 2020. These are the factors influencing the operation of the food system. Climate, extreme climate events and variability of climate behavior promotes major impact at all stages in the system, between the field, the country and the city, transportation, consumption, processing, is especially the behavior of consumers. And when we mention food environments, there is a relevant characteristic in the marketing channels in Latin America. Small outlets, farmers markets, and wholesalers. We have are key for access of food products, accounting for 60% of direct sales to consumers. That's why cities are critical. Cities are more the consume more and more food and energy, demanding resources from the region. The people living in the urban area went from 29% of the total population by mid-20th century to 81% today, most in cities with less than 5 million people. It's important to emphasize the recommendations on the need to emphasize food of urban population, and mentioned in different aspects in the LARC 39 in Brazil in March this year, which recommended the strengthening of domestic supply chains. The SOFI in 2023 and 2025 made reference to markets and strategic stocks and the recommendations of the Food Security Board in 2024, recommending reinforcing markets, public procurement, and community kitchens. Thus, FAO is assessing public procurement and the public procurement systems so as to make these traditional channels part of our agenda. Based on these recommendations and guidelines, we're still working with the different regional networks with the key stakeholders looking for the change in food systems to make it more efficient, inclusive, and resilient. This map shows the regional network of public systems, the SPAA, which was implemented in 2014 when representatives from Brazil, Mexico, Bolivia, and Chile requested the FAO putting together a regional network to discuss public procurement. This network now has 19 countries with a permanent updated agenda conducting annual meetings, which will be in Dominican Republic next August, and 4 committees of virtual practice, besides ongoing technical exchange. The network has a governance, electing the chair and the vice chair and the different members, and the FAO acting as a technical secretariat. These are some examples of public policies adopted by public systems of the SPAA. These are the innovations underway in different areas, such as the inclusive marketing of family farming in Paraguay, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Dominican Republic. Price transparency for wholesaler markets in Panama and Brazil, and upgrading and the efficiency of markets with the circular economy programs in Argentina and Peru, and the electronic marketing and digital platforms facilitating marketing between consumers and producers in Peru and Brazil, as seen in the pandemic. Let me emphasize that the public programs in Mexico, Honduras, Panama, Dominican Republic, is selling basic food items, even 50% less price than the regular markets. Producers or farmers markets supported by authorities in Honduras, Costa Rica, and Dominican Republic include family farmers offering products with very attractive prices, as we can see in the map. In Costa Rica, in Watuso, prices are 30 to 50% lower compared to local market. Yet another alternatives are the traditional food markets. As I said, 60% of food trade in the region goes through traditional markets that survive and accounts for the supply of fresh and healthy food, but requires the support and investment to improve quality standards, sanitary standards, face inefficiencies, and contributing the environment, mitigating greenhouse gases, and mitigating the use of energy. FAO in 2017 identified in the region 294 wholesaler markets in the region, and since then started a series of initiatives to build the agenda for technical collaboration for the modernization of the industry. These are key players to face supply issues. They account for amazing volumes of trade nationally. This, did you see the percentages the going through these wholesalers? These are big concentrators. They set prices and mobilize thousands of producers and consumers. As with the memorandum of understanding between the FAO and the FLAMA, with over 1,000 people from the region to discuss topics addressing the trade in the market. We have exchanges in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Mexico. We publish newsletters with 107 wholesale markets in the region, contributing to the mapping of the information and data collection. Besides these markets, there are the private networks and associations, farmers markets, wholesale markets, allowing us to collect information, produce sound evidence on the operation of these markets. We have Froilán here. He is leading one of these associations, ASOFI, the Confederación Nacional de Ferias Libres in Chile. We are committed to social innovation with activism of citizens to face the challenges today. We are acting for the regional agenda with community kitchens. We're supporting urban agriculture and peri-urban, promoting public procurement with a focus on circular economy and solidarity. We also have a regional net of cities led by the mayor of Cerro Navia city here in the metropolitan region in Santiago, with the 81 cities from multiple countries promoting these goals. Switching the way of displaying the information, the way we normally show our information, this is a different way of expressing the understanding on a food system and the flow of supply of food. We're funded by Brazil. We have a number of discussions with multiple actors, and this is the way they understand the operation of supply systems in their territories. We have the privilege of discussing and working with the representatives of these sectors, both public and private, civil society, academia, producers. We're trying to include the cultural food legacy in the FAO agenda for sustainable and resilient food systems. All this information is collected in the FAO webpage. These are the reports on the different meetings, the data collected, the published information, and key ideas. We have 35 technical publications to make visible all this information from the different surveys conducted. And we're sure that these contributions with other teams from FAO and other colleagues in different national offices in the countries, which are part of this big team committed to change the food systems in the region. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor Intini, por esta presentación.
Thank you, Mr. Intini, for this presentation that enables us to acknowledge the importance of all these food distribution networks at accessible prices, especially in the most vulnerable areas of Latin America. Now we'll move on to the presentation of national experiences, and we will get to know the experiences of Panama and Chile and others to get to know about the resilience of food systems faced with extreme climatic events. Each presenter will have 10 minutes for their presentation. First of all, I'd like to invite Niño Murillo, Executive Director of the Agri-Food Marketing System of Panama, who will talk to us about the measures taken faced with the El Niño phenomenon, considering the potential of different initiatives that they have.
Muy buenas tardes, un placer poder.
Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be present with you and to be able to transfer to you our experience and knowledge. A major greeting to all participants, and especially for those that in one way or another support us in order to continue to make progress faced with different phenomena that we face. The Institute of Agricultural and Livestock Institute works with the phenomenon of El Niño. We have worked or identified the points that we have to clearly define in order to move forward, because we have divided this into two parts: drought on the one hand in some regions, and in other regions of our country where it rains permanently and therefore floods are very common, with a very well-defined food security via our strategy and with the different local distributors that help us in places in different parts of our country. And the idea is to transform the primary sector so that we can have more areas to sell and monitor this, and the logistical strategy in order to reach the different points, and also anticipatory actions in order to somehow foresee any situations that may arise. And we've been doing this for 2 years now. We have made a comprehensive change in our system for that purpose. Now, we define the El Niño phenomenon as a phenomenon that generates impacts and places food security at risk. Agricultural losses are a reality, and that impacts our production, and we're not able to achieve the growth that is required and prevents us from achieving our goals, and that impacts the economy and also the number of producers that we may have. Production obviously drops, price increases appear because people have to very quickly respond to these situations, and often they try to save the little that they have, and that leads to a cost, an issue involving greater costs, and that in turn increases prices. The risks for food security implies that there is a threat to the availability, access, and stability of food in our country. Of course, this also impacts roads and leads to logistical problems when it comes to transport and our supply chain. However, we have strategic plans in place, as I mentioned beforehand, enabling us to achieve immediate liquidity for producers from the primary sector. and of the products that are most produced and that have a greater demand, so that we may have timely transfers to producers in order to promote national production in when it comes to different products, the expansion of the commercial life of products, so that we can provide people with the necessary security so that that product that it reaches industry may be transformed and provide us with enough time so that we can reach the places that we have to cater for. The capacity for logistical management of the product is important. Less than 2 years ago, we worked on this with IMA so that in logistical terms we could have full traceability of the product ever since it leaves our stores and until it reaches its destination. That enables us to have an adequate inventory control, and that forms part of the actions in order to obtain statistics in real time, and of course also the ability to cater for or to face up to natural disasters. For example, the support for producers. When we talk about support for producers, we focus on knowing in percentage terms how able we are of conducting their activities so that can be effective. At present, we could have a climatic situation that is uncontrollable. In some, and we have several agro-industrial products, such as the processing of milk with grade C, industrial grade. Also, in areas where we produce onion, corn, or beans. And we also produce canned food. Because if we don't process that, the food goes bad as a result of the high temperatures. And therefore, we're able to make tomato soup with chicken, which is very nutritious. And that helps us to alleviate producers, national producers. Well, we purchase the products of national producers, and that is directly marketed. However, something that has had a very positive impact upon both producers and the consumers in Panama is the impact of what we call the producer space, created for different sectors, vegetables, potatoes, fish, fruits, beef, chicken meat, pork meat, and so on. And this does not involve a cost for the institution. It's simply, we simply provide an opportunity for the producer. The producer provides its product, its production, and sells that in street markets that operate every day. In 2025, we received the visit of 57,000 assisted producers with an impact of more than 500,000 people involved in this type of production. And that enables them to sell this product. And thus they can deal with the situation. The benefits are fundamental. There is a direct cycle of payment to the from the consumer to the producer. And we have strengthened this. The scheme of Panamanian protein is very strong because and we're able to reduce prices and also promotes agro industry. This scheme has to do with milk. We have bought more than 1.8 million liters of milk, which is a volume that is very high in Panama. And therefore, the idea is for people to quickly obtain their money, and therefore we act as an entity that balances the market so that people can obtain processed foods such as cheese, for example. Fresh cheese that enables us to, and we're able to reach different parts of our country with that type of product. And this represents, as we are requesting in this technical information sheet for this product, 2 slices represent a glass of milk. In other words, we are providing a tremendous capacity to the consumer. And as a result of this, we're obtaining an important protein benefit, especially for children and for their relatives. So we provide direct support to the producer, and thus we transform the raw material. We provide, we boost the local economy, and we provide greater availability to consumers. Rice is the biggest consumption in our country, which is supported by wheat producers, and this represents more than nearly 400,000 quintals per month. And therefore, we buy this product directly to producers in the primary sector. And we have 21 wheat mills that work with more than 25 to 30,000 hectares of rice purchased directly from the primary sector. Now, for that purpose, we need to make sure that we have an adequate marketing to the producers. And this is something that is applied at a national level, and it prevents climatic events from preventing producers to sell their products. If we have a lower percentage of production, it makes life easier to producers, and it enables us to maintain this supply chain. We face the impact on our products of natural disasters has been tremendous, and thus we have been able to obtain the support headed by our government and with different entities that are related to these issues in order to face up to natural disasters. This implies an immediate response in order to provide uh, food, and we do this with the support of the different entities that form part of this commission, and as a result of the regulations that we have in place. And the way in which we do this, and whatever food is needed, we are able to supply this by land, air, or sea, and we have already anticipated this response. The idea is to ensure food security, and IMA has evolved towards a modern social and strategic model. And what is most important in order to seriously anticipate in a disciplined and organized fashion is for us to be able to understand that the El Niño phenomenon is something that we will not be able to change. We will simply be able to prevent it and forecast it and so on, but we would work in this as a team. A nation that works as a team will be able to achieve its objectives, and we have achieved many positive results from this strategy. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Murillo, for sharing the Panamanian experience and the role of these programs in order to ensure food for the population. Now we'll move to Brazil, and I invite Joana Nayara Bittencourt from the National Supply Company of Brazil, who will talk about the measures that have been taken on board in order to ensure food supply at a national level. You also have 10 minutes for your presentation, and you have the floor.
Hola, buenas tardes. Un momento.
Good afternoon.
Compartir la
I'd just
pantalla.
like to share my screen.
¿Aparece? ¿Está
Can you
bien?
see it? Yes.
Se ve en un formato muy pequeño.
We can see it in a very small
Bueno.
format.
Un momento. Una vez más.
Let's try this again.
No sé qué parece aquí. Ahora sí. ¿Ahora sí?
Así.
Bueno,
Se volvió a reducir la...
no sé qué pasa.
Ahora las vamos a presentar desde acá. Le damos la
Está
palabra.
bien. Está bien. Un momento, entonces. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Me
Good
llamo
afternoon,
Nayara.
everyone. My name is Nayara Bittencourt. I am Director of Agricultural Policies and Informations of CONAB, Compañía Nacional de Abastecimiento de Brasil, and I would like to talk a little bit about the impacts of El Niño in Brazil and about the main aspects of the plan of action that we're working with as ministries, especially the Ministry of Agricultural Development and the Ministry of Social Development here in Brazil, in order to talk about certain implications, especially as a result of the crops that we will harvest in Brazil now and the impact that that will have upon the food security in Brazil during the next period. The first aspect, as everyone has said, is that El Niño is already underway. This is not a forecast, but a fact. And the probability, as you know, is of 99.4%. And there is also quite an important aspect here, especially because we're not only talking about the intensity, which is very, very significant, but also the coincidence with the agricultural calendar in Brazil, especially because the peak of this phenomenon here in Brazil will coincide with the planting of the first harvest. First of all, the maturity of the wheat harvest of rice in the south of Brazil and the beginning of the second harvest of both corn and beans. And therefore, we will suffer a very important impact in Brazil, especially in some regions. That will be very important. In the south of Brazil, there will probably be an excessive amount of rainfall over and above the average. We already had a tremendous impact in 2024, and this year we can already evidence rainfall in Brazil, especially in the south of our country, which are very intensive, and that will imply a high risk for wheat, rice, and corn, because we have a large amount of hectares planted with these crops, especially in the south of Brazil and in the northern part of Brazil. We will face a big possibility, and that we're already evidencing, of a severe drought, especially with a deficit of rainfall in the Amazon basin and with a drop in the water level of rivers. And therefore, there is an important risk, which is a logistical risk, and also the risk of wildfires. Here in Brazil, we suffer a tremendous impact on yucca and on corn, and in the northeastern part of our country, there is a probability for 2027, for the beginning of 2027, we will face insufficient rainfall or inadequately distributed in this territory. And again, there we will face a tremendous risk also for beans, for yucca, for corn, and also for animal feed. Next slide, please. And for food consumers, we have what we call two waves of impact when it comes to consumption. The first wave will be now in late 2026 and early 2027, especially for these crops that I mentioned, vegetable, fruit, and also for wheat. And for these crops, we won't have storage capability. And the second wave will last throughout 2027, especially when it comes to rice, beans, and corn. And here we foresee a tremendous impact on animal feed, having an impact on beef, eggs, and milk. And therefore, this is a wider-ranging impact throughout 2027. And we have a chain of basic foods for national consumption. And here we will also evidence a drop in the area that has been harvested, and especially in the production of rice and wheat. In terms of wheat, we will experience a reduction in terms of production, a 20% reduction in terms of the area that has been planted and in terms of what is produced compared to the previous period. And there'll also be a significant reduction in other products. At present, we already have a reduction of areas and of volumes, especially when it comes to wheat and in terms of garlic. And in the south of Brazil, we will also experience the events of different fungus and as a result of the impact of greater rainfall. Another important aspect, especially in the northern part of Brazil and the Amazon area, we also face important logistical issues. So we have 20,000 kilometers of the Amazon that can be sailed, and many areas live on the riversides, and the river is the only means of transport for these people to receive food, especially food, fuel, and also medicines. And if we are already evidencing a drop in river levels, especially in the Amazon area, and thus we're already experiencing a reduction of food that is received in this region. And now, together with the Ministry of Social Development, we are thinking of coordinating some food baskets and also to purchase from family farmers that live in these areas so that we are able to develop preventive stocks, so to speak, primarily comprised of fish, wheat meal, and yucca. So the idea is to conduct this anticipated supply to these communities that are quite isolated. We have 6 critical basins, especially when it comes to these major rivers in Brazil, Madeira, Purus, Rio Negro, the Amazon, and others. And we are already experiencing a drop in the water level in these rivers, but that will be expanded. That will be even greater between October and November, and therefore we must undertake these actions this month and also next month at the most. This is a region that is naturally drier, but it often rains at the beginning of the year, and these rainfall at the beginning of the year is quite important. because it will have an impact upon the harvest of wheat and on the harvest of animal feed. Today, at present, we're not experiencing this rainfall in January, and in consequence, we will probably experience a reduction in animal feed for protein production. And this is something very serious. And therefore, we're thinking of certain actions in order to guarantee the supply of wheat for small animal producers in Brazil, for family farmers, that because we know that they will suffer an impact in terms of their crop at the beginning of next year. And we are conducting these initial purchases in addition to what we do every year. But this year we will require a little bit more wheat in order to supply these semi-arid regions in Brazil. Another important aspect is that together with the National Geography Institute, we have tried to determine the impact upon the poorer, the more vulnerable populations. The impact of food costs is greater, and therefore this represents 22% of the lower income households in Brazil, and therefore families with lower purchasing power, this limitation represents 22%. And people with a higher purchasing power, for them it represents 7.7%. And therefore, the difference in the impact of the greater cost of these basic food is very different when it comes to people with lower or greater purchasing power. These are some of the actions that we're also already discussing. Today we received very good news this week because the entity that organizes all the ministries and provides us with guidelines in order to conduct these actions has announced that for the first time we will open up to work with the prevention of the impact of El Niño, with the absolute probability that we already have that the El Niño will hit us hard or very hard, and that will impact this population. And therefore, what has been authorized is the creation of an extraordinary credit that was announced today in order to undertake certain actions. Now, what are these actions? So the first one is an action related to the distribution of food, and therefore we will already coordinate this distribution and have this distribution in riskier areas. So we will also do this together with the Ministry of Social Development, this program to the PAA, which is a program to purchase from family farmers. And therefore, we will purchase in advance from communities that work on river basins with a community approach to food. We will purchase fish and wheat meal, as I said beforehand. These purchases will focus in the northern part of our country, where river levels are dropping. Another action is the purchase of corn, especially to coordinate a sales program that is already underway in different parts of our country in our storage units and working in partnership with some municipalities. And there we sell corn at a lower price, at a more accessible price for these people, especially for people that produce animals. And this has been authorized today. It was publicly announced today. And the idea is to purchase a large amount of tons of corn in order to provide the supply, especially in the northeastern part of our country. And we want to do this now because later on this corn has to reach the different sales units to sell this wheat. And the last measure is a purchase of rice in order to have regulatory stocks for rice. And around $500 million reales were authorized in order to purchase this rice, which would imply purchasing around 300,000 tons of rice. This was announced again today, and now we're awaiting for the legal confirmation of this initiative. I would like to say that we're already running more than 10 minutes late. This is the last slide. There is a special window here for preventive action that is still open. It's important to mention that acting in advance is cheaper, and therefore there is an institute by Fome Cero Institute. That means that each dollar invested in early actions prevents up to $7 in terms of response to emergencies. And for this purpose, we're using all the instruments that I've already mentioned, but this has to be done in advance, and this deadline is not negotiable. We must act now, and we cannot wait for the situation to happen in order to act, because that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, and I apologize for going beyond the time that I was allocated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And in closing, now we have Niña Renigues, faculty from agronomics on agri-food resilience and the role of markets in extreme climate phenomena. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you. I will try to supplement the previous presentation and distribution of food with the perspective of the country, the production of this, and how nature-based solutions may help our resilience to these phenomena. What problems do we face? Today, we're discussing El Niño. But as you well know, in the last few weeks, multiple regions in Chile have faced intense rainfall after nearly 10 years of a mega drought. These are pictures from the news the last few weeks alerting the risk of floods, which is not only a lack of water, but also excess of water. Last night, we saw different areas which are fully flooded. This is in the context of higher prices in fuel, fertilizers, as well as a much wider context where the agri-food industry has to deal with the contributions to the so-called global crisis, climate change, pollution, and dramatic losses in biodiversity. The last report from the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, the VCC, in the 5th chapter, focused on adaptation of agri-food system to climate change, emphasizes the priority or need to diversify our simplified agricultural system at multiple scales. On the left-hand side, this is intensive agriculture with high yields based on high doses of inputs, characterized by little species and sizes are greater with the without semi-natural habitat compared to the need of transition towards agroecological agriculture, where you can keep yield, but as well as ecosystemic services such as the water cycle regulation based on this is partial or full substitution of inputs by biodiversity, diversification of crops, as well as the integration and interaction between agriculture and livestock production, as well as the ecosystemic services of a wild biodiversity. These are smaller fields with a semi-natural habitat key to provide habitat to biodiversity as well as to face these extreme climate events. How can we diversify our systems and how does it work? Most of these impacts on diversification come from the so-called portfolio effect, where as an investor will not put all eggs in the same basket. We take that the multiplicity of responses from different species to environmental stressors. So a producer, diversification of crops, particularly the use of legumes, take different forms in our study quoted in the last IPCC. We compare monoculture of corn and the intertwine and the performance was greater compared to having them separated. The more simpler rotations were diversified rotations also provides a protection against loss in yield because of drought. This is actual Chilean fields. We compare cereal production and if we have a naked soil compared to forage, not only increase carbon and nitrogen in the soil, but also this was valued because they could sell livestock when at the same time they were buying inputs for their crops. Domestically, we have shown diversity of crops stabilizes national food production. Yet another mechanism besides this portfolio effect through which diversification acts is through impact on soil. In this study, we show that diversified rotation have more organic matter, which provides this the soil acts as a sponge. The black lines are positive relationships. There's a greater organic matter had a significant positive relationship, but because it was protecting against water stress and improves the yield when in middle of a drought. This buffering effect in case of a drought. Other economic studies have also found that the more organic matter in the soil, the lower the payment rate required by agricultural insurance. Another thing is that these practices improving the health condition of the soil. They also serve other purposes. On the right-hand side is a naked soil, and the other one it's a conventional tillage or and strip till, where the surfaces is protected, and these practices have proven to reduce runoff up to 20%, as well as the flooding frequency, because only 1/3 of the surface area is covered by annual crops instead of annual crops with vegetal cover, because these will help to infiltrate water. It will allow for seepage of water, and this may be a contribution. In the context of climate change, on the one hand, we see water scarcity, but when it rains, there is flooding, and we need to manage these water. Besides conservation practices, there are experiences trying to channel these water to areas where we can recharge aquifers, both agricultural and non-agricultural. And some experiments looking at the optimum period to avoid affecting crops negatively at bigger scales, so as to reduce flood and protect the quality of the water, catch sediment. We have seen that the vegetal bands and herbs planted actually contribute, because they may become wetlands, and which promotes the preservation of a native forest. In summary, with Sara Acevedo, our colleague, we reviewed current evidence and how multiple practices such as diversification of crops and livestock integration, organic matter amendments, medium disturbance, and residue retention helps seepage into the soil and to increase the potential for deep percolation to recharge aquifers, thereby creating positive conditions for the root system development and positive interactions between microorganisms and roots to help our crops to face potential droughts in the future. So, in summary, what is it that we can do to face future El Niño as well as the climate change? The last report by IPCC emphasizes agroecology and nature-based solutions as an adaptation strategy to extreme climate phenomena. And the message here is to emphasize is not only is that, but they are also multiple benefit strategy to face this fertilizer fertilizer price increase and political issues and reduce pollution of water in our rural areas. They are a long-term investment, as well as such as the incentive system for soil protection. These are a long-term investment for a resilient future. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ringrid, and I'd like to thank speakers for sharing their experiences. In closing this discussion, let me thank FAO for this meeting, speakers that made their presentations. Initially, we've thought of a Q&A. Unfortunately, we have exceeded our time. So those of us will be asking those questions, enjoying a coffee. But let me just say that this has allowed us to see the need of a joint work between scientific research, contributions from multiple stakeholders in order to strengthen food production, but also protection of nature against El Nino, and how these will help public decision making and the design of policies to serve the needs of urban and rural communities. Working together in science, technical knowledge, public policies will allow us to guarantee the fundamental right to an adequate food in our region and to guarantee over the long term that we will continue to have those ecosystems and those ecosystemic services. As a school, we're committed to continue to act as a bridge between innovation and building of capabilities to serve the society and the agri-food system. Before we break for coffee, let me present a token of appreciation to the Regional Director of FIU and speakers, Mr. Torero and Mr. Intini.